Welcome to the review of 10 Questions for Theists.
Today, we are going to be responding to Answers in Reason, which is one of my favorite atheist channels.
They're kind of like a cult, aren't they, Stephanie?
The intangible concepts that we can think of that are gods purely exist in our minds.
But just posing the question, I don't think that the intent is to commit to pretending it's true.
Because at the end of the day, it just seems like we're just making arguments from incredulity.
Hello, and welcome to Answers in Reason's review of the responses we got to 10 Questions for Theists. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And tonight we're going to be addressing question 8. And in question 8, we asked, have you always been a theist? Has it always been the same God? And have you ever changed religion or denomination?
Yeah, and we had some great answers to this. Only a few that were really different, though. Most of the responses to it were, I've always been a Christian, I've changed denominations, sometimes once, sometimes several times. And unfortunately, what we were hoping with this question was that we would have many different kind of faiths answering the question, and perhaps some people who've completely changed faiths. Like, we've got one or two that we're responding to where they did, but we mostly got Christians responding, unfortunately, so we didn't have a wide variety of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of the responses were, I've always been a Christian and I've changed denomination. That's basically what they've been. And we were hoping for responses. For example, Khalil Allah. He was the empathetic atheist, and he is now, a full-on hardcore Muslim. And it would have been interesting to hear his sort of story. I mean, the shortened version of it, you can go and see on his channel some of his stories along those lines. And we've got we even had him on and had a conversation with him as well. And it was very interesting. And I hope we have him back on in the future. And I hope that we have some more videos come in as well from people that will answer these questions and will have a different story to tell.
Yeah, it would have been great to have somebody like Cafe or Ocean Keltoy who've moved from Christianity in their youth to atheism and then over to like Norse paganism or just paganism in general, or maybe Wiccans. That would have been really good as well.
Yeah.
So who knows? Definitely. Maybe if some of them watch this, they might go, you know what? I'll help them out.
I hope so. I really hope so. It's something we've said from the beginning as well. We're more than willing to do a round 2 to this video. We would love to have more responses. We've had one come in from a polytheist, and they're sort of there on their own, and we need a few more videos from you polytheists and Muslims and any other religion, pantheists, panentheists, or deists, all of you. We would love some video responses so we can do a round 2 of our 10 questions for theists and actually answer them and have some really, really different answers for us to discuss. And hopefully you've seen from the way we interact over these questions, we're not here looking to talk down to people, and we're not doing the typical atheist thing that you might see on very the YouTube channels, where all they do is condescend and patronize. That's not our vibe, man.
It's not bait for point scoring to our fans.
No. But anyway, yeah, so tonight we ended up choosing only 3 videos, so it's quite a short one. And there's a few points to discuss here. So tonight's first video was from Andy Rants. So you might remember him. He's been in a couple of the videos so far, and he was the secular theist.
So let's bring that back up. Have I always been a theist? No. Has it always been the same
God. Well, if I wasn't always atheist, it wouldn't have been always the same God. I had the notion that people believed in God, but as before I came to what I believe now, it would be I had the atheist view that if what was described as God or gods was literal and there were actual conscious ethereal beings that presented their will upon the world, that would... It's an unbelievable notion because they're not physical, they're not tangible. You can't see them, you can't witness what they're doing, and all you can read is stories about them. But as Peterson says, there are truths within those stories that relate to our psychological notions of what we gain from relationships and witnessing people, and our evolutionary biology, and how we select mates and live our lives, and how we emotionally connect to one another. So it hasn't always been the same God because it wasn't a God that I believed in beforehand. It was the atheist notion that everything's derived from our own psychology, that our psychology is just some physical electrochemical process in the brain. And there we go. Have I ever changed religion or denomination? Yes, I went from being an atheist with the common atheist put forward arguments to thinking about it, and then I became a secular theist. So that was my change in religion, as it may be called. Yeah.
So that was Andy, and he went from being what he referred to as a standard atheist, which I think many of our viewers will have an idea of what we think that standard atheist is, to what he says is thinking about it, which led him to be a secular theist. Now, I think that in itself is maybe a little uncharitable, because I think a lot of us atheists have thought about it a lot. And it hasn't turned us into theists. I do think that there are many atheists that don't think about it enough. But he does mention something that I do want to focus on, which was the truths in stories. And I think there are a lot of truths in stories, whether it's the Bible or it's Aesop's fables or it's Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels. There is a hell of a lot of truths that you can find in stories and things to focus on that are really positive. So I think there are lessons that we can all learn from the Bible, even as atheists. Stories that we mentioned earlier on in our answers, the Good Samaritan, the story of washing the feet, the story of the coin, and so on and so forth. If you haven't heard us, check out that episode where we discuss people's favorite verse or story from their holy book, because it's absolutely brilliant. There's a number of fantastic lessons to learn there. But Dave, what did you take from what Andy said?
I mean, there is some good ideas in there. I know he quotes Jordan Peterson. Yeah. But what Jordan Peterson says about, there's these ideas in the Bible, like archetypes, and like you said, truths in the Bible. And there is truths in fictions. And we're not talking about like there is a train station in London type truths, like deeper truths about how we see the world, how we navigate the world, what makes us better people. You think about books like who have a central message, like 1984 has some truth to it. Brave New World has some truth to it.
A lot.
Yeah, that's it. So there is good truth that can be found in fiction. But I don't think Andy's kind of ideas are very confused, at least for me. Like, he seems to think that God exists, but not just in the sense of a truth in fiction, like not just in like a way of guiding our morality, and a way of keeping all of our morals in check, and a way of organizing our society. When we spoke to him, he seemed to think that God existed in some manifest way other than as this kind of archetype.
Yeah, I mean, when we spoke to him, he addressed God as being essentially natural processes that happened, and you know, knowledge without having a mind or consciousness, and it was all like, it not having intent but intently doing something, and there was a lot of confusion with
Yeah, and there was the whole God is the thing that exists between our thoughts and motivates our thoughts.
and the things between the spaces of things as well, or something like that.
Yeah, it was all kind of weird.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had with him. It was just very confused, and quite a lot of the time there was technical language used unnecessarily.
And out of context.
It seemingly, yeah. Because he obviously knew what he meant by what he was saying. Or, well, I say obviously. I assume he knew what he meant by what he was saying.
Yeah, I think that's closer. Yeah.
But, it's one of those things of it really didn't sit well when you know what at least some of those words meant. And, Dave, having done a couple of degrees in philosophy, knew what all of them meant, and knew, I'm sitting there going, Dave, like this doesn't quite make sense to me. Like, how does this follow this, follow this? And Dave would go, well, it doesn't, especially when you include this, and this, and this. And like, right, okay. So it's not just me being an idiot that doesn't know enough. He's just using words.
Yeah, but don't forget, I'm an idiot too.
Yeah, but you're my favorite idiot.
I barely know what I'm saying half the time.
I mean, I'd love to have a chat with Andy again in the future, if he can translate all of his thoughts into plain English.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely fantastic. If he could actually turn around and describe what he means in ways that, say, a 5-year-old could understand, I might be able to understand what he's getting at. I personally didn't find, the point in referring to what is essentially natural processes as a god. And his form of secular theism was essentially that. I mean, you can watch the Secular Theist video with him and us and see if you agree with our conclusion there. It's there, it's public. I mean, maybe you'll get something different. Maybe you can teach us something on that, and I'm happy to discuss this more in the future. But I'm not sure how he ties, the truths in stories, like truths he got from the Bible, truths that he got from other holy books, to his end result of secular theism.
No, I'm not.
If he had turned around and gone, he was a form of Christian or a form of Hindu or something like that, that's a bit different. They believe in that God, but not necessarily that religion. Then it would have made a bit more sense to me. But for the end result of what he referred to as God, I feel like there's this massive disconnect of this bit in the middle.
There's an explanatory gap.
Yes, yeah, most definitely.
A greater explanatory gap than between qualia and the physical mind.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. Anyway, still an interesting answer, and still a very interesting guy.
One thing to say before this as well is, I mean, you could think of something like cultural Christianity as doing something like what Andy says, taking the truths from the Bible, like the metaphorical truths, taking the kind of unity and the custom and the rituals and using them in a kind of secular way. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus, but they accept Christianity as a good guiding force. You could sort of see a secular theist in that way as well, I guess, and see what Andy's saying with truth in fiction. It can create that kind of thing, and I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that.
No, not at all. I actually see a lot of positive in that sort of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Just something to throw in there at the end.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so I think we spent enough time on that answer. And Andy, if you do want to come back and clarify things some more, we're more than happy to have you on. I would hope that you would be able to dumb down your position, so that we can understand you. We're idiots. Talk to us like we're idiots. Don't talk to us like, we're people that know what you mean.
Just remember not to have a thesaurus before coming on the stream.
And yeah, I'd be very much interested in a further conversation about what we've discussed and what you've said here. So next tonight we have a story from John Buck.
I wasn't raised Catholic. I just converted this Easter. I was raised in a sort of non-denominational home, but it sort of followed a much more, I guess, like Hebraic sort of rendition of Christianity, but also done from a very Protestant lens where like they're primarily focusing on the Bible and trying to read it and connect to the Old Testament doctrines and rituals and practices and all of that. I've only discovered recently that there's a lot of similarities to, I guess, Seventh-day Adventism. So that if I were to give somebody an idea of how I was raised, it would be close to Seventh-day Adventism. And then I converted over to Catholicism. I know some people have a sort of issue with saying you converted when you're still within Christianity. I was a Christian before and I was a Christian after. But I don't know. This is just sort of nomenclature. It's not a significant change. It's not I needed to be rebaptized or anything because I was baptized in a sort of Baptist sort of church and other non-denominational places. So yeah, that's I could go into my journey into Catholicism, but I don't know. There's a lot of elements there, and it's probably not worth it for just these questions and answer videos. But yeah.
And that was John Buck, who's one of our favorites. He's such a nice guy and always great to chat to, and he's got a good sense of humor. But in the clip, he says he converted to Catholicism in Easter. I'm guessing this is last Easter. And he grew up in a Christian household, but it was a non-denominational Protestant household. But now that he's kind of moved away from that, moved into Catholicism, thought about it a bit more, he's seen similarities between that and Seventh-day Adventism.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it shows a number of things here. Is the fact that even Christians can be not exactly happy with the form of Christianity that they practice. And they can move around from one form to another. And I've known a lot of my Christian friends do this. And I find a lot of them, the ones that move around a lot from denomination to denomination, end up deconverting because they feel that every denomination is lacking something or missing something. And they eventually get to the point where this doubt is enough to convince them that maybe there isn't this singular truth. Even if there are certain truths, like Andy mentioned in the previous video, there isn't the truth in the one true religion sense. But also, because we're so near Easter, and it'll probably be post-Easter by the time this video gets released, happy 1 year Catholicism.
Happy anniversary, yeah.
I hope you're happy. At the end of the day, as long as you're happy and you're doing good, that's all I really care about. So, yeah. It is interesting to me, though, seeing how many Christians do jump around a denomination. Seeing Christians jump around from denomination to denomination seems to show, at least to me, that there is something missing from the religion. It shows that there is this lack of consistency. It shows that even if something was divinely inspired, it's so tainted by us humans that can we even really call it the Holy Bible? I'm obviously approaching this from a very atheist perspective, and I do understand that. But the fact that there is no real consistent position, and the fact that more and more denominations keep splitting off and more religions keep popping up and going, I think what God meant to say was, it just, it casts serious doubt for me, and it makes it harder for me to accept any of the more mythological stuff can be true at all, even if there are certain truths within the Bible, which I do think there are.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And it sort of lends weight to the sort of idea that God is the author of confusion. I mean, you think about something like Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and even within each of those, there's various different sects, various different takes, various different ideas. And it's even more apparent in something like Islam, where the Quran actually says this is a clear and easy to understand book from Allah. But yet there's all these different takes on what a single verse might mean.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that we could reference your article about is the Quran perfect there as a clear example. If it was perfect, there would only be one way it could be interpreted, and it would be able to be translated to English. You wouldn't have to learn Arabic to be able to really understand it. And
even Arabic speakers can't come to a single unified opinion of what it means, let alone translating it to English. Even Arabic speakers can't come to a single agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you hear, well, those Muslims aren't really following Islam properly?
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to labor this point any further. It is just something that does cast some doubt for me, and I know it does for some other atheists. So I'd be interested in some theistic responses as to how they explain this thing in a way that they think would actually appeal to an atheist, not to themselves, not to their other fellow theists, in a way that would actually satisfy an atheist like me. But Dave, before we move on, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say something like one other thing that something like this make you kind of wonder is what makes these specific denominations appealing? Like, what makes them think that these are the correct interpretations? What makes them think that the other ones? What's the psychology behind picking particular denominations?
Yeah, I mean, my experience of that from particular friends has been generally moral points of view. They've often been quite liberal and not accepted their denominations' versions of trans rights and gay rights and so on and so forth. I mean, sometimes it's gone the other way and they weren't the people I thought they were.
Yeah.
But in general, it has been people who have been very liberal in their, they haven't been quite so fire and brimstone. They've been more along the lines of people like Nathan, even though they've been a bit more orthodox in their beliefs than Nathan has. But they've sort of, like we mentioned in, I think it was the last episode, like you mentioned in the last episode about movies, where he thought that people in the Bible didn't necessarily have the same concepts of things like being trans and being gay and so on and so forth like we do today. So he doesn't think that that stuff applies to the current world, and they have had sort of a similar opinion to it. And like I mentioned a few episodes ago, part of God's test could be come to realize that actually, there's nothing wrong with actually being gay or being trans, and Christians should be accepting of people's choices or non-choices, being accepting of the way people are born, as it actually is. So yeah, I don't know how much truth there is to any of that. Obviously, I don't believe the Bible is literally true, even if I do think there's some elements of truth to it. But maybe if it was true, that could be the case. Anyway, let's move on tonight. And as I've mentioned him already, actually, let's bring him up. It's Nathan, or Digital Gnosis.
Perfect segue.
Come on, what? So, I mean, the answer to the first question is no. I think the answer to the second question is yes. And the answer to the third question is yes as well. But I think people are probably bored to death with me sort of talking about that path by now. But I've held a lot of different positions about metaphysics and commitments about religious beliefs over the course of my life. In terms of denominations, I've only ever really been a part of an evangelical Calvinist Christian church. And I've been to a few Eastern Orthodox services and a few Roman Catholic services as well. But I'm not, I'm not actually at the minute a part of any denomination, really. And even on the second question, has it always been the same God? On that, I would answer yes, even when I think when I was like 18 or 19 and my commitments were, and I was quite interested in sort of like Eastern religions like Hinduism and stuff like that. And I was trying to piece things together in that way.
So that was Nathan. And as often is the case, he gave a very interesting answer. Now, he said he was not always a theist, but it was always the same God. So from that, I infer that once he became a theist, it was always the same God that he believed in. He then mentioned that he changed through a number of different denominations, but is not currently part of any particular denomination. He mentioned that he'd been to a number of different services from a number of different denominations. So, yeah, very interesting. But actually, Nathan is one of those really weird Christians. If you watch some of his videos or have a chat with him, he's very atypical. Many Christians would say he's not a real Christian, much in the way that when we had that chat with Rev, he had so many Christians have a go at him for being a Christian scientist, and Christian scientists were not real Christians. I think one of the things that Nathan says, he doesn't believe in a literal resurrection, for example. And there's a few other ones in there as well. So there is some very unique beliefs that Nathan has as a Christian, which is why he often gets othered by other Christians, because he doesn't adhere to the dogma that most of them do.
Oh, yeah. And he's got some really great takes. And I think if more Christians actually kind of approached it like he did, then I think a lot less atheists would have problems with Christianity and with most Christians.
Yeah, that's. I think you're right, actually.
Yeah, most Christians wouldn't accept that he was behaving like a Christian, but in my eyes, his thoughtfulness, his considerate, just how considerate, how much consideration he has for these ideas and for other people.
How kind and genuine he
yeah,
seems.
Yeah, that's it. It's how I see a Christian is supposed to be.
Based on understandings from the Bible and all those claims that you see Christians constantly make. Like, Nathan is one of those people that seems to embody the spirit of Christianity, even if he doesn't adhere to the dogma of Christianity.
It's true.
I definitely agree with you there. And it's interesting. It makes you wonder how much of that is because he is a Christian himself, or is it just because that's the way he is, that's the way he's been brought up? Is it the nature nurture type situation? How much of it is Nathan is the way he is because he's the way he is? Or how much of it is he's the way he is because he thinks that that's the way a good Christian should act? I don't know. I don't know if it really matters either. At the end of the day, he seems like a great guy. I think that's the bit that
smart.
matters. Yeah.
I wish I could be half as smart as he is.
But yeah, I thank you for your answers, Nathan. I mean, we've really enjoyed them. I know we haven't put you in every single one of the videos, but you've provided a lot of unique insight, and I've enjoyed my conversations with you. And I'd love to have you on the stream to discuss some of it, because it's that weird Christianity. It's not like normal Christianity, so it adds a dimension of interest for us, in the same way that we had Rev and Emerson on, because they were forms of Christianity that you don't really see in the UK. They may sort of be there in the outskirts, but they're not really there. I'd love to have a conversation with you and about your core beliefs and where you are now. And I know you've got a lot of stuff like that on your channel, but it might be nice to have sort of a line in the sand, right? We don't know anything. Tell us about everything in the sort of detail that you care to do now. What's your current position? What led you here? Because it is one of the most unique Christian perspectives I've ever experienced myself,
and probably only possible coming out of Britain, or
true.
A non-American kind of country.
That's true. I'd be very, very impressed if we saw this sort of thinking coming out of a very fundamentalist country like, as you mentioned, America, or if we were to see this form of Islam coming out of a heavily Muslim country, or this sort of thinking coming out of places where it was really, really like, you will believe this,
all intertwined with who you are. And
yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. I think that is part of the point. Like, it over here, it's not as dogmatic as it is in places like America, and it does allow a little bit more freedom of thought, I guess, because no one ties you so much to, oh, well, you're a Christian, you have to believe this.
That's it. Most Christians over here will go, well, that's a very unique take. I don't see it quite like that, but I'm glad it gives you peace and happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We've got our fundamentalists.
Oh, of course. Especially the crazy people with the cartoon books. You're about to get on the train to London, or from some station in London, and they come up to you. Have you seen this thing about hell? Yeah, well, we get the crazies. The thing that we find odd is the people that we have as the crazies are the ones
the normal.
leading your churches
Yeah.
in America. But yeah. Anyway. I don't really have anything else to add on to tonight's points. Do you, Dave?
No, not really.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you all for responding, and I hope you enjoy it. And next week's video should be the questions for atheists, answering the questions about morality and if there are any moral truths, which should also be very interesting as well. And as we mentioned it tonight, I would definitely recommend the conversation that we had with Emerson Green on his journey from being a young earth creationist to being an atheist, or the video with Rev, and he went from being a Christian Scientist to being an atheist. Both of those thoroughly interesting videos that I thought were absolutely fantastic. But that's it from me tonight. You've been watching Answers in Reasons, responses to 10 questions for theists. Have yourselves a good night.
Good night, all.